Hello and welcome to the latest webinar as part of the Innovative Law Practice Techniques series. On behalf of the ABA-LP Division's Legal Project Management Committee, we welcome Delilah Flom and Suzanne Wood. Delilah Flom is a partner at Winston and Strawn Chicago office. She serves as a partner in charge of Knowledge Management, KM, and Legal Project Management, LPM, for the firm. Ms. Flom is part of Winston's LPM team, which includes our Director of Pricing and the Chief Information Officer. The LPM team is charged with implementing a consistent and value-driven LPM approach with a suite of tools available to our attorneys firm-wide. Ms. Flom also serves on the firm's Enterprise Content Management team and previously served as a partner in charge of KM for the litigation practice. Ms. Flom is a member of the True Value Partnering Institute, an invitation-only virtual think tank connecting legal industry thought leaders and those responsible for driving value in their organizations. The Institute consists of select in-house and law firm professionals, legal industry experts, and academics. Our second speaker, Suzanne Wood, is a lawyer and the National Director of Legal Project Management for Norton Rose Fulbright, currently certified by the Project Management Institute. She has practiced in the Toronto Litigation Group since 2003, defending companies and individuals in a variety of lawsuits, including complex commercial and pharmaceutical class actions and restructurings. Ms. Wood now focuses exclusively on implementing legal project management across the Canadian practice. Ms. Wood has significant experience in the application of formal project management techniques to promote efficiency and predictability in legal services. This experience includes the management of numerous document review projects, including those occurring in multiple jurisdictions and involving millions of reviewable records. Before I turn things over to Delilah and Suzanne, I just want to let everyone know that we'll be recording the webinar and we'll send out a follow-up email with a link to the video. We'll get this video out as soon as possible, shooting for possibly the end of the day today, if not Monday. Delilah, feel free to take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start first with talking about what is knowledge management. And for those of you who are working in the knowledge management space, you will know that knowledge management has been around law firms for a long time and has taken different forms depending on whether you are in the United States versus the UK or a system that came up through the UK system, such as Canada. Nevertheless, we thought it was important and helpful to sort of reset the table about what knowledge management is today, and then during the course of this presentation, we will talk about what else knowledge management might become. And we borrowed a very good definition from our colleague Ron Friedman at Fireman and Company, where he says that knowledge management is the art and science of capturing and reusing legal know-how and identifying colleagues with relevant experience. In other words, KM captures and reuses lawyers' collective wisdom. And the reason that we think that's such a good definition is because everybody who's hired a lawyer is ultimately looking for their judgment or their wisdom. And obviously, knowledge management is a way in which a lawyer can use and repurpose his or her legal know-how, also identifying other colleagues who might be helpful to the client in order to fully serve the client and ultimately give the best judgment and hopefully wisdom they can with regard to a particular matter. Obviously, the capture and reuse of lawyer work product has always been an essential element of the practice of law, but has become much more compelling today in light of the drive for efficiency and the need for lawyers to respond to clients' demands for efficiency and value. And therefore, we now will talk about what legal project management means and then put together what we see as the interrelationship between these two important concepts in terms of how everyone is practicing law today, whether they know it or not. Suzanne?
So the question then becomes, well, what is legal project management? And legal project management, we see, it's really more the application of lots of those knowledge, tools, and resources that already exist within lots of firms. And it's about pulling together that proactive, disciplined approach to managing the legal work, doing the defining at the front end, but also continuing through to do the monitoring, the budgeting, and the reporting back to the client. So it's really about that client relationship in the way that we deliver our legal services. KM is really the tool that can improve the practice of law, whereas the LPM is the technique for improving the processes and the business outcomes related to the practice of law. I see LPM as really the umbrella that really covers across lots of those aspects of the legal relationship. So taking those great tools and templates that are developed by our KM colleagues and using them on a matter-specific basis at particular times throughout the life cycle of the matter.
So what then is the intersection of knowledge management and legal project management? Our view is that LPM drills down on efficiency at the matter level and focuses on several different components. We're not going to go through every single one of the LPM elements today, except to say that there's no set definition of LPM in the industry, but essentially it does go from defining the scope of the matter all the way through an after matter or after action review to determine lessons learned and how best to move forward. So when you look at the efficiency, you want to look at what's in scope versus out of scope, and then assessing the risk to the client with regard to completing the matter. And this is very important in a way that the client would define success. Many lawyers have come up through the system where they have understood that the lawyer should leave no stone unturned, try the case, get every last point on a deal before you close, when in fact perhaps what the client really is looking for is to settle that case before precedent is established that would be harmful to the client and its business, or to make sure you get that deal closed by the end of the third quarter no matter what. And that might mean having to find some ways to let some of those regulatory issues go by the wayside. And then of course you must plan and manage the budget, and obviously in the context of pricing the matter, and as I said, have the after action reviews, where you go in either with the client or with the internal team to talk about lessons learned, ways to identify further efficiencies, pain points, so that the next time you do that work, you're even more efficient and you're constantly improving not only client satisfaction, but hopefully the realization and ultimately the profitability of the matter that is sufficient for your firm in terms of making sure that you're not losing money on a matter. Effective KM today focuses also on efficiency. You want to be able to leverage that work product in a way that is the most helpful to your lawyers and to your matter team, and leveraging all of the knowledge resources, other people who may have expertise, electronic data resources, and not just work product. So you can ultimately use knowledge management as an overall strategy.
So we thought it would be useful to talk about what knowledge management sort of impacts throughout the life cycle from a legal project management perspective. So the legal project management life cycle really gets divided into four major components. The first would be the initiation phase, through to the planning, the monitoring, and then right through to the evaluation phase. So under each of these phases, we've identified the types of involvements and interactions that KM would have with the legal project management team. So in the initiate phase, we're really going to have our legal project managers use the template statements of work. They're going to be applying consistent matter types and phase codes. And I know a lot of people on this call have been involved in many committees looking at how can we standardize those matter types and phase codes. But it becomes really important here at the front end for our legal project managers, because for them to be able to come in and be able to switch amongst lots of different types of matters, they need to be able to have that standardized phases and task codes to understand at the front end, how should the work typically evolve? What is the work that would be involved? And a lot of times in different organizations, the legal project managers don't actually have a legal background. So by using those templates and consistent matter types and phase codes, we're giving them a leg up. So this is one of the really critical areas where KM can support the legal project management function. We're also looking at, in that initiate phase, getting that industry or client information. Lots of that type of research also sits in the KM function. So that's really critical for the legal project manager to be able to understand what is it that our clients might be looking for, and how can we make sure that we are meeting their needs from an industry and client perspective. When we move into the planning phase, that's where we're going to apply process or matter maps, checklists, some experience search tools, to figure out who are the right resources that we should be using. Are there ways we could do these things more efficiently? Are there checklists? Are there precedents that exist so that we can really be striving for that efficiency that Delilah talked about? In the monitoring phase, again, those templates and precedents and the checklists and reporting will be critical to making sure that we're staying on track and we're being as efficient as we possibly can. Collaboration sites is another aspect where the knowledge management teams are really able to support the collaboration and communication of legal project managers as well as the lawyers with their clients in the actual delivery of the legal services. Making time entry easier is another way that KM can really support the lawyers from a legal project management perspective by potentially standardizing some of the time entry narratives or providing some training and background on how should people be docketing appropriately and what do really good descriptions and narratives look like in that standardization. Also really important to really make that efficient and consistent delivery of legal services. Then in the final evaluation phase, really useful to have not only the knowledge managers develop some of those template lesson learned documents, but also have them involved so that we can be gathering the knowledge to make sure that we're not keeping all of our best templates in binders in different individuals' offices, so that it is continuing in a cycle and we're actually improving our efficiency. And conducting those after action reviews so that we can identify how could we have done things better, or is there a way that we could have been more efficient, and we can loop back into that process. So this is sort of the framework within which we think lots of those matter level knowledge management sort of traditional tools can be integrated into the legal project management life cycle.
And before you leave that slide, Suzanne, if you can go back for just a second, obviously each of you will find at your own firms where that you might have additional items that you would like to include in this life cycle. Suzanne and I tried to come up with one that we thought would be applicable to most firms that are working in the KM and LPM space, but you might, in the initiation phase, for example, have your conflicts process involved there in terms of making sure that it's keyed into your matter types and keyed into the kinds of phases and task codes that you can bill to and the ones that you cannot, to limit in-scope versus out-of-scope work. You may find that you have additional kinds of checklists or other materials to use in the planning and monitoring stage. And you may also find that you have client teams or other arrangements where an ombudsman on behalf of your firm may in fact go out and talk to the client about how a particular matter has gone, or in some instances I know firms have hired consultants to go out and talk to clients because sometimes it's easier to have a conversation without the firm involved, in which case again all of this rich material can be used for those purposes.
And that's an interesting point as well about how we can really make sure that we're utilizing all of the resources available in our organizations, because some of the items that sit on this list, like maybe the industry or client information, that might actually sit with business development within your firm. And so making sure that that knowledge as part of your knowledge strategy, we're not having segmented or siloed approaches to the collection and delivery of the knowledge.
And this is particularly important for clients today, because often when you survey clients in terms of what they're looking for from their law firms, they are saying, we want more efficiency, we want no surprises, and we want you to understand our industry. And when you think about those kinds of areas of critical importance to clients, you can see that all of those are touched upon through this LPM life cycle.
So we thought it would be useful for us to go through now and tell you a little bit about each of our firms and the way that they are organized and structured.
Yes, and Suzanne and I really enjoy working on this part because we represent in our respective firms, we think, sort of the two standard approaches to KM and LPM, because I am a partner at a U.S.-based firm. Of course, we do have offices now in London and elsewhere, but Suzanne came up through a firm that was based in the U.K., still has a huge presence in Canada and the U.K., and therefore there are different approaches to knowledge management, and I think therefore differences in terms of how the KM and LPM teams are set up. Traditionally, British law firms had in the law firms lawyers who simply help with knowledge and resources and not necessarily having any billing functions. And that's been a long tradition of the British law firms that has, as I said earlier, been part of the entire of all firms that grew up under the British system, Canada, Australia, and elsewhere. In the United States, we have almost always had lawyers bill time. And it's difficult even today for some lawyers at American law firms to understand that you're going to have a lawyer who's not going to be billing time to a client all or most of his or her time. And yet, I think many firms and a lot of firm management realize today that you are far better off having some of these resources available so that you can provide the kind of efficient and valued services that clients are looking for. So Winston is more of a traditional American law firm in terms of its approach to KM. We have a small KM group in the U.S. and London. We focus on knowledge management related tools for attorneys. We have developed a firm-wide intranet. So everyone on the Manor team will have access to our various knowledge management resources with an enterprise search function, and which we try more and more to make it more like a Google-like experience. And then the an experience database where you could pull up relevant experience that other colleagues may have in order to serve a client. We also have practice group sites where we can have templates, checklists, latest developments that are useful, chat room functionality if you're looking for that. Matter sites with knowledge management resources. Here's the way in which you start out with a particular class action. Here is a template brief for filing a motion to remove it to federal court. Here is a template for or a checklist for the way in which you then proceed in terms of building the case up before you go to discovery, et cetera, et cetera. And then also electronic resources, links, and other library materials that are useful and which are so much more efficient to have available at a lawyer's fingertips as opposed to calling the library or chasing around for it one more time. And then in legal project management, we initially focused it on budget and pricing matters because we believe that would be the way in which to get the attention of our lawyers in terms of being able to show how you can improve your budget, improve your pricing, improve client satisfaction in terms of not going over budget, no surprises. And once we establish that budgeting tool, we have moved on to the use of checklists regarding scope, risk, client communications, and other elements of LPM. And one of the other things, and then after actions reviews as well, as we've mentioned before. And one of the other things that we are doing is we are monitoring the expansion of clients' legal operations function. More and more clients are attempting to standardize their approach to their relationships with their outside law firms, sometimes through the legal operations function where, again, you have a core group of people in-house at the client who are dedicated to more efficiency, more collaboration, the use of an extranet sites in order for the client not only to collaborate with its particular law firm, but perhaps if you're part of a group of law firms that have been selected through an RFP, all of the law firms will share that extranet in some ways in order for everyone to have access to materials to most effectively represent the client across the board. And then moving forward in terms of looking for standardized approaches to phase and task codes and billing so that everyone is on the same page in terms of the way in which they are inputting their time and the client can more easily see how a matter is actually going so that you have an apples to apples kind of comparison for the purposes of budget monitoring. Suzanne?
So as Delilah explained, Norton Rose Fulbright obviously has a longer tradition of knowledge management coming out of our UK and also Australian and Canadian practices. For those of you who don't know, Norton Rose Fulbright is a Verein structure, and so I am responsible for our Canadian sort of LPM operations, but I do have a counterpart in the US, and then also, we're also building out those capabilities in other regions as well. So in terms of the knowledge management team, we do have more than 50 members of that global knowledge team, and that it actually ranges from having knowledge partners and lawyers as well as to technologists and other sort of coordination practices. And so that representation across all of our regions is really key to being able to share and leverage the information that we are able to gather. The focus of those teams are on templates and tools and technology, particularly looking at document automation, collaboration sites, contract review, and some other pieces of technology. And the wonderful thing about having this long history of knowledge management is that we do have people available and accessible who we can draw on as resources to assist on any of these initiatives as we move forward. One of the major projects that we've been sort of focused on and undertaking is globally standardizing our phase and task code templates. And so in addition to sort of your UTBMS codes, we are developing globally standardized phase and task codes for all of the matters that we undertake. We did create a standardized list of matter types last year, and that was a project that took about 18 months, as you can imagine, dealing with all of these regions. It was not an easy undertaking. So phase 2 of that is to actually, again, standardize those phases and tasks of work, which we think is really helpful for us as really the way that we can deliver knowledge and also use that to leverage the way that we are going to price and monitor and track. Because we will be able to really have a bigger sort of fundamental understanding about what kind of work do we do and how is it comparable across different regions. Is there, one region that can really crack this out and have much more profitable in a particular area, and maybe there's ways that we can learn from that. The legal project management team is actually less formalized globally. So we have, at last printing this said that we have 11 people with LPM in their titles, but we actually hired 2 additional people this week, so we're up to 13. But that is a group of legal project managers. We've got LPM lawyers. We also have coordinators and analysts. So our legal project managers are a mix of people who are lawyers or paralegals or law clerks, and who have also been trained in legal project management. And so that team works, I almost think about it a little bit more in terms of portfolio management right now we're focusing on. So rather than looking at each of the individual matters and focusing on, assigning tasks in the traditional way that you would think of a project manager, we're really looking at it more on a client basis. So in terms of a client, how are we delivering those services to the client? Is it consistent? Is there a different way that we could be doing that? Could we be leveraging people in a different way? Should we be staffing it differently and outsourcing portions of it, or building templates and tools? So focus really on that scoping and budgeting at both a matter and also portfolio level, and that staffing and reporting. Because similar to Delilah, I think that legal project management really took off in the last couple of years and got a lot of traction when we were talking about scoping and budgeting. And so it was really easy to explain to our partners, well, your clients are asking for an estimate or a quote, and they probably want a flat fee. Let's see how we can work to scope and budget it, and then track against that budget. But what we're hoping to do now is really take it to the next level. So not only are we going to be able to explain to you how much it should cost to get this done, but let's find out if there's a way to do it better, faster, more efficiently. Is there, that technology piece that we should be integrating into it? So focusing on, process mapping with our knowledge management and legal project managers. How are we doing it now? How should we be doing it? Is there a better way? Is there a piece of technology out there that we should be leveraging? But that's where we are now, and the way that we're sort of focusing for the next year or so.
And we hope that the way in which we have outlined the different structures that can be used in a firm for knowledge management and LPM will give all of you some ideas to think about what might work in your firm. Some of you may be coming from firms where you have a long tradition of knowledge management but are trying to move into legal project management. Others of you may have jumped into the LPM pool and maybe don't think so much about knowledge management in terms of an actual concept at the firm, or perhaps you did at one time, but the firm sort of lost sight of it in terms of actually devoting staff and resources to it. So this is an opportunity for you to think about how to knit together your knowledge management resources, both internally in an intranet site, if you don't have very many people perhaps, or if you have people who have been designated as knowledge managers in the past, how they can be helpful in your LPM efforts as you move forward to create an approach and a structure that's going to work at your firm. So one of the other things we wanted to talk about today, because most firms have at least had some experience with knowledge management over the years, is to give you some ideas about talking to your firm management about why knowledge management is even more important today. Because it is, as we said, in the past, obviously, it was about maintaining your resources and making sure that you had appropriate work product to repurpose for clients, because after all, clients would often hire you because you had done a particular kind of matter in the past. Today, for the most part, many clients will not hire your firm unless you have done several kinds of similar matters. And so the repurposing of client work product becomes, for a new client, appropriately obviously, is even more critical, because that is what is going to become your bread and butter in terms of the kind of work you'll get over and over again from a particular client, and will allow you to build a better mousetrap in terms of being more competitive against those other firms who may be bidding for that work or responding to the same RFP that your firm is. So today, since a key goal for clients is efficiency, knowledge management certainly can and should be pitched as something that is critical to that effort, because obviously producing what the client perceives as the same legal result in fewer hours or with lower priced lawyers, such as the use of practice attorneys that may have been trained with a particular set of skills in mind, or hired on a contract basis to work on certain kinds of matters, can be critical in terms of lowering those costs. And that obviously results in turn in improving efficiency for your law firm going forward, as you also address the other elements of legal project management that the client may require, such as budget monitoring or flat fees and other alternative fee structures.
And so, we really were thinking about, well, what are the consequences of improving efficiency? And at the fundamental basis, your clients are happier. And I think that is really critical. We had, a partner that I went and met with a couple of months ago, and he was one of those people like, well, I don't know why we need all this overhead, right? Like, why do we need more legal project managers? You're not billing anything. And I know a lot of people are getting that sort of pushback within their organizations as you're looking to grow. And what I was trying to explain, and was actually very successful, you'll be happy to know, is my job is to actually make you look good. And so if you appropriately apply legal project management and knowledge management, your clients are happier, and we actually make the partners look better, right? So your clients will like you more. They'll like working with you because you've actually lowered their fees. You have increased that predictability. You have been able to help them to internally look better to their own internal stakeholders, so that they're not having to go back and say, oh, this came out of nowhere, and now the budget, they blew the budget, and we need an extra, $100,000. So by making the clients happier, we make our lawyers happier. So they end up having to spend less time having those awkward and difficult conversations, because they've actually scoped it out at the front end. So doing that front-end scoping, looking at ways that we could be more efficient, reusing templates, introducing technology, it really helps the clients, and it also helps the lawyers. So some of the lawyers as we all know, will come back and say, well, what's in it for me? Why should I be more efficient? I won't be able to dock it as much time. I'm not going to be able to make as much money. And so the focus I think you have to shift is into profitability. And matters obviously become much more profitable the less work our partners do on it. And so helping them to understand that realization rates will improve, profitability is going to improve. So overall, you've got actually more time to go out and look for new work and new opportunities. You are going to actually be able to spend more time with your family and to really improve those relationships, both with your colleagues, with your clients, and overall to improve the relationship in the way that we deliver our legal services. So that efficiency conversation, which oftentimes starts out as we're not going to make as much money, you sometimes have to delve a little bit deeper and really look at, what are these amazing side benefits of improving that efficiency, which might in the short term lead to a smaller bill, but in the long term leads to a much richer and fuller relationship with our clients.
So let's talk about the knowledge management math of improving profitability. And one of the key areas, which I think dovetails into what Suzanne was talking about, and which also could be a place for you to start if you are a firm that has only done a little bit in LPM and maybe you have some knowledge management resources as well, and that is to look at situations where you have write-offs or write-downs. And our definition that Suzanne and I like to use, and just is a write-off is something that a write-down is something that you cannot send out to that client. You get that draft bill and it says 20 hours for a particular task that should have only taken 10. You can't send that out, and so you're gonna write down 10 hours right then before you send that bill out. That is always a situation where LPM or some knowledge management resource could be used. Either better training of associates, leveraging some sort of checklist, template, model brief, model document for a corporate deal, something like that. Then sometimes you send the bill off to the client, and the client comes back and says no. Now, it might be, no offense to any clients on the call, it might be that the client is not being reasonable, but it might also be because the client says to you, look, I use this other law firm and it costs 10% less. You are not being as efficient as I want to see. And so again, that will be a situation, if that's the case, where someone has built a better mousetrap than your firm has in this space, and you're going to need to figure out what that is. Whether it's, as Suzanne mentioned, some sort of electronic tool, some sort of way to create an interactive extranet site with the client in order to more easily give them an answer on a labor matter or a labor question or whatever it might be. That will allow you to improve your efficiency. And all of this is in the context, obviously, of billing hourly, but actually it also can be applied to alternative fee arrangements as well. If you are only, if the client is only going to pay you $50,000 for the matter, if the matter is not done at $50,000 and $1, you have to keep going to finish that matter correctly. That is your ethical obligation. And therefore, every other dollar that you spend after that, as you must spend it, is money that is not going to drop to the bottom line, and in fact is going to have to come out of the realization of that matter, obviously, as well as the overall profitability of the firm. And so improved profitability is very critical. The general rule is that every dollar saved in write-offs or write-downs becomes profit, and as Suzanne mentioned, would assume that new work is available to use for freed up time, and that profits will still remain stable. However, I do want to also say, before Suzanne goes on and talks a little bit more about some of these elements, that this assumes and presumes that your compensation system for both partners and associates will start to take into account that efficiency. And that is an issue that I think a lot of firms still struggle with, because to become more efficient from an associate standpoint can mean that there's less and less work for them to do unless more work is coming in the door. So you need to pick your shots at your firm to figure out which matters are going to be riper for leveraging your knowledge management resources and LPM than others. Some firms have clients that will continue to pay based on the fee structure that they've used in the past, and in my experience, those are not your best opportunities for an LPM, KM discussion. But if you go to the your financial group, your CFO group, and can get those write-downs and write-offs, that will often be one of the best places to start in order to be able to find places where people need help to be more efficient and provide more profitable services to happier clients.
And to that point too, if you're looking for a place to start, go to your, finance team and get that list of write-offs and write-downs and figure out where is there a lot of that activity happening, so that those are people who are ripe for assistance because they already see that there's money on the table that they are, just writing off as a matter of course. The other way that we've looked to identify those key places where you could work a little magic are with associates and practice groups where they have a lot of non-billable time being entered. We struggle, as I'm sure many of you do, with partners who will say, well, just put your time to non-billable because I don't want to have to write it off or write it down. So by identifying those little pockets, there are also some opportunities, because some matters that look like they're profitable might actually not be as profitable if you looked at all of that other non-billable work that's set outside. And so, really by looking at those write-offs and write-downs, and even without any of that, you're not going to reduce your profits by being more efficient, because you're going to actually be able to use lower cost resources to do the work. You're going to be able to identify, using this template, this person actually is now the right resource to do the job. They are going to have a lower cost base, and so you are going to be able to be more profitable on a matter-by-matter basis. Lots of organizations aren't yet in that profitability mindset, and that makes it a little bit more challenging. And that's why, looking for those write-off, write-down opportunities is a good way to identify, where people might be able to use a little bit of extra help. And even if none of that convinces, your partners, another great way to get in there is to look and say, you know what, even if we don't get new work, our competitors are getting more efficient. And so it's in that bid and RFP process. So where you are losing work to other organizations, other firms, because they are bidding at a lower rate, that's another opportunity. So you have to actually improve your efficiency in order to retain and keep and grow the business in particular areas. So if you're having a hard time getting, some traction in your firm, another great resource would be looking to your business developers and your marketing teams to say, what is the language that's coming in the RFP processes? Are they asking for LPM specifically or KM? And how can I, identify which industry is looking at it, which clients, which matter types are the most cost sensitive, and help to improve just the overall work in that area, which will again lead to increased profitability.
And to follow up on Suzanne's point on that with the RFPs, we are finding, as I'm sure most of you are as well, more and more demand from clients in RFPs for what is your knowledge management approach, what are you doing in LPM, what are your resources available, and all of you need to be working with your firm management to make sure that your knowledge management folks and your LPM people are part of that process, so that you have a consistent message that you're sending out to clients in that space, and then go back and figure out, if you didn't get that RFP, why you might not have. Because more and more firms are focusing on efficiency, and in some instances actually requiring their law firms to collaborate with each other on a variety of topics. I'm involved right now with a major client where there are a number of firms, and we collaborate together on numerous issues involving legal operations, legal project management, and knowledge management kinds of resources. And that is what the client is expecting, and you have to figure out a way to address that need in order to remain competitive and be an important part of the client's overall outside counsel team. So I think what we need to do now is move on to talking about knowledge management as an essential for today's lawyers and why we believe this is something that is going to continue to be very important in the context not only of LPM but overall in terms of where a law firm is going to want to go with regard to their strategy as a law firm.
Yeah, and for lawyers who are out there who still think that knowledge management isn't essential, you know, they're living a little bit in the dark ages, unfortunately, because what the transition that most of our lawyers and partners are having right now is to realize that this is actually a business. And if they would like to remain in business and would like to remain profitable, it's essential that you start implementing all of these efficiencies that have been implemented in other industries, you know, in some cases decades ago. So our clients are demanding this efficiency, and if you don't actually respond to it, they're just going to go elsewhere. So, you know, really drilling in with our clients in the RFP process and doing, you know, those after-action reviews and after-bid reviews is really, really helpful to identify what are those areas where we're, you know, not getting in. And partners are often the most receptive when they start hearing it from their clients. So there have been, you know, circumstances I certainly know where there have been people who I've been really wanting to approach and wanting to look at and helping them, but it wasn't until their client said, you know what, you're not meeting what we need here from an efficiency perspective, and that ends up being that hook. So we can actually, through effective KM, make matters more profitable and provide more time for our lawyers to be focusing on business development, improving their work-life balance, and then really just taking on that additional work so that they can make more money.
So that moves us into a discussion of knowledge management as a strategy for the law firm. We've talked about the different ways in which you can approach knowledge management and legal project management and their interrelationship. Obviously through business development by getting involved in RFPs, through financial data if you have access to that, and some firms are struggling with some silo structures in some instances where maybe that's not going to happen all the time, where you can identify write-offs, write-downs, or through practice group leaders where you can go to a practice group that you know may be having issues with a lower cost competitor, taking some of their work away and saying let's work on ways that we can make our work just as efficient and go back and rebuild those client relationships. But another way is perhaps, depending on what's going on in your firm, to look at what the management of the firm may be thinking in terms of long-term planning and strategy. And this, we have to tip our hat to Jack Bosselman, who is chair of the ABA's Productivity and Knowledge Strategy Committee, who believes that knowledge management is really knowledge strategy. And I'm actually a believer in Jack's philosophy as well, because I think all firms should be considering their resources and their wisdom and judgment that they offer to their clients on a regular basis, which the clients are going to hire them for because they have done work in this area, makes it ultimately part of the overall strategic plan of the firm. To use an analogy, the toy store, Toys R Us, for lawyers, it's knowledge R Us. We are about knowledge. That is what we sell. We don't sell widgets. We don't sell hamburgers. What we do is we serve our clients in terms of providing our knowledge and wisdom and judgment to their behalf, and representing them and counseling them in a variety of matters. So you may very well find that at your law firm you have perhaps a small management team that's looking at strategic issues, considering planning. That might be another way for you to go and talk to them about the fact that really knowledge management needs to be knowledge strategy for the firm as a whole.
And when you think about that sort of as the strategy, looking at the various KM resources and tools that all of our legal project managers should be tapping into. So they are able to, the KM lawyers, to be able to not only just be KM lawyers to support the practice and make it more efficient, but providing things like enterprise search engines, experience or expertise locators, their ability to gather and share work products, And this piece is really critical when we think about knowledge as a strategy, because if you think of knowledge management as, you know, so-and-so down the hall has the best templates for when I'm bringing this motion, that is not a knowledge strategy, and that's actually leaving a lot of knowledge out there. So you've got great people in your library services, you've got, you know, people in your marketing teams, you've got fantastic, you know, client relationship people who have all of this knowledge and information, and we need to be bringing that all together as a really cross-functional team to really implement that knowledge strategy. Obviously, you know, setting up internet sites so that we're better collaborating with our clients can drive so much efficiency and just really cut down on that lack of communication that sometimes happens on larger matters and with bigger clients. Online electronic resources, templates and checklists. And I'll just look at some of these other resources like dashboards and, you know, the data analytics and that effective use of client teams. Really improving our communication tools so everyone who needs to know knows what's happening is really, really critical to making sure that we are successful. And I'll pass it over to Delilah where she talks about some of these KM resources for the enhanced efficiency. And we're trying to leave some time for questions because I'm hopeful that people will have some.
Yes. And so as Suzanne was talking about sort of the overall big picture in terms of knowledge management resources and tools, we also wanted to bring to your attention those resources that we think are much more specific for actual enhanced efficiency at a matter level. You can have comprehensive practice platforms where if you do a lot of class action work, you can have all of your materials in one place or all of your IP materials in one place. You can have 50-state surveys for some of your labor and employment work, or 50-state based resources that are electronic in nature that your teams can access. Experts and judges information and what's marketed in terms of what's going on out there. Perhaps many of you may have access to practical law, where you could go in and find that latest tax provision in a corporate deal, and your client is asking you to do that corporate deal, which you've never done it with this new tax structure. You can actually find those documents now online and be able to pitch to the client that you understand what the issue is and still hold on to that work. Drafting tools like Westlaw Drafting Assistant, which is used both for litigation and corporate matters, and new ways that streamline SEC research if you have a matter, either litigation or corporate, that deals with one of those issues. And then, of course, deeper access to dockets and risk management information that's online. Early case assessment also is becoming something that's very critical for a lot of firms because it allows you to pitch to a client that you can efficiently handle and resolve at an early basis matters that are maybe more routine through early case assessment, which ties into data analytics to be able to estimate how long a case may last and what it would cost to settle versus trying it or taking it to the motion stage. And that would allow you to pitch to a wider swath of work from a client because you can handle everything from soup to nuts, and therefore you have more opportunity once you get in there to do that for a client to also be able to get some of the other work that comes in the door. And I can't emphasize enough the emerging importance of data analytics. There are more and more resources available out there. Lex Machina, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, which allows a client, and therefore you better be able to, as a law firm, pull up data about wins and losses for particular lawyers in your firm versus particular judges, and other very case and judge and jurisdiction specific data that will allow the client to see who actually has the best track record in, the East Texas Rocket Docket IP litigation, for example, or class actions in California as another example. And that will allow you to be more competitive in a pitch or realize that you have gaps that you need to be working on if you intend to remain competitive in that space. All of these kinds of resources, and we've just listed a few of them, we believe are more focused on a particular matter which directly interrelates with LPM, while obviously all of the other KM resources that we talked about are very important for the overall management of your work product and understanding your, the current financial state of the firm in terms of realization and profitability, which then again gets back into the LPM space in terms of budgeting and predictability.
And it's really only through effective knowledge management and that front-end effort that you're able to use lower-cost resources. So unless you have a good set of templates in place, a good workflow, you've process mapped what you need to accomplish, it's really, really difficult to sort of in-source or outsource some of that work, to identify, there's a first-year associate who's able to do this work, or maybe we can use some non-lawyer personnel, paralegals, or if we have some complex scientific documents that need to be reviewed, should we be bringing in scientists to do that review? Why are we focusing on lawyers? And so once you have thought about and organized your knowledge management, identified sort of that key area where you want to focus, doing that process mapping exercise is critical to being able to actually send and outsource or in-source tasks to the right resource. Using these databases and tools, like Delilah was explaining, Practical Law, can be a really important and effective way to make sure that the most or lowest level resource is able to be equipped to do and to deliver the legal services. There's lots of this pressure on all of us to make sure that we are sending things to lower cost resources, but we also need to be in a position to support those individuals to make sure that they are able to deliver that consistent high quality legal product, or all that's going to happen is we're ending up back in the write-off, write-down phase because we have not given them the tools to be successful.
So we thought it would be useful here at the end before we take questions to just give you some more specific examples of how knowledge management and legal project management work together. And obviously it occurs the planning phase in terms of experienced search tools to staff the matter with the most experienced lawyers and staff, and we gave you examples of that. Identification of matter or process maps, and then during the matter management phase, obviously templates so that you can actually perform the work and manage the matter, developing those checklists based on best practices for use of performing work that you do repetitively to make sure that they're efficient and consistent, and then use of client or matter intranets to collect work product and other resources for the matter team's use, and in some instances expanding it into an extranet for client use, and then tools to improve time entry and identify associate or practice attorney resources so that you can more quickly get your arms around what's being done on that matter, preferably even on a daily basis if you're doing daily time entry, so that you can understand what's going on, know whether you're on budget, know whether there's an issue that you need to raise with the client early on, because again, all of the research indicates if you raise an issue early on with a client and explain how something has changed based upon a change in the risk that hopefully you've already identified for that client, the client is much more willing and able to work with you to adjust early on, as opposed to having to write it down later after you've already run up a bill that is not as efficient as it should have been.
And really, in final, just KM can be so incredibly supportive for LPM, particularly if it is a new or emerging LPM practice, or your choice has been to hire legal project managers that don't have a legal background. Because by implementing those consistent matter types and phase codes, by really creating ways to track information and portfolios of work, you're actually providing the legal project managers with that foundation that they need to be able to support the partners within your organization, and also that intersecting with that business intelligence by helping them to understand not only what is the work that your lawyers are doing, but how can we actually do that better, faster, or more efficiently.